Here now is Dan Mitchell, Center for Freedom and Prosperity chairman. Dan, I mean, a lot of this on the back end, and what we've seen in the past year and a half, has to do with the pullback in regulation and some, in part, tax policy as well. Do you agree with that?
I agree. I think the lower corporate tax rate, far and away, is the best news that we've seen for markets and the economy. And the easing of regulation, we haven't actually cut back that much, but simply the fact that we're not layering on new regulations at the same rate, I think that's also been good for the economy. I do worry about trade, and in the back of my mind, I always worry about whether or not we have a bit of a Fed-created bubble because of artificially low interest rates, but fingers crossed, we're in a good period right now.
Yeah. Spending restraint that has not been there, to say the very least. I mean, no one has mastered sort of cutting back on all of the tremendous outlays. When does that come to bite us?
Well, I think it certainly will backfire against Republicans when it comes time to try to make the individual tax cuts permanent. But we don't have to worry about that till like 2024, 2025. However, the fact that government does keep getting bigger year after year, don't forget, every time the government gets bigger, the private sector, by definition, gets smaller. Now, it's not the kind of thing that causes you to topple into a recession, but it is something that sort of just erodes the dynamism of the economy because, frankly, politicians and bureaucrats don't spend money as intelligently as people in the private sector.
And the president seems to know that. He talks about that. I mean, he understands that government is crowding out private investment and is the swamp, but at the same time, it seems to spend money and not cut it out of the budget in places. You know, he talks about putting more money to work on whether it's defense or, you know, anything else, even the opioid crisis. So it just seems like the bills keep stacking up. What do we do about that?
Yeah. And let me give you some historical comparison here. When FDR went into World War II, he cut domestic spending when defense spending was ramping up. When Truman, another Democrat, went into the Korean War, he cut domestic spending as defense was being ramped up. So whether or not you agree with Trump on spending money on a wall, whether you agree with Trump on increasing defense spending, why doesn't he at least be like Truman and FDR and cut back on some of the parts of the budget where, frankly, the federal government shouldn't be involved anyhow?
He's definitely watching the market. The president tweeting just a short time ago, longest bull run in history of the stock market. Congratulations, America. Very subtle there. You mentioned trade as a challenge. You know, when I talk to people off the record who aren't, you know, thinking about politics and worrying about what they're saying about politics in front of other people, they say that they can tell that the trade war has to do with the president trying to negotiate a better deal, that we've been getting hosed on trade for a long time when it comes to China or wherever else, and that they do believe that his negotiating is going to pay off. There's always the danger that it doesn't, though, Dan, right?
Well, the thing that I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows except maybe Trump, is he really trying to get other countries to lower their trade barriers, in which case then all the saber-rattling might pay off? But if he genuinely doesn't understand trade, if he thinks that somehow all countries should have zero trade balances...
You know what he's going for, because when he sat with the G7, he said the goal is to, why don't we all drop all of our tariffs altogether? He's offered that a number of times. He's said it, and no one takes the bait because they don't want to do it. They want to continue to protect their own companies. But he's offered that so many times. I don't think we doubt where he's coming from. The doubt is, will he be successful?
Well, but he says things that indicate that every country should have a zero trade balance, and that's silly. I don't have a zero trade balance with my local grocery store. So yes, I love some stuff Trump says, but I worry that if he doesn't really grasp what the underlying goal is, to let people trade freely with each other. It's not to have a zero trade balance.
Absolutely. No doubt. Dan, thank you for your time. Yeah.